The morning sun cast long shadows across the settlement of New Haven as its inhabitants gathered in the central square. Silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the occasional sob from the crowd. Today was a day of tribute, a day that came once every decade, and one that every colonist dreaded. 12-year-old Jiho stood at the edge of the stone platform, his hands bound with ceremonial silk cords. Unlike the others who had been offered before him, he didn't weep or struggle. His dark eyes swept across the faces of the colonists who had raised him, people who had now chosen him as their sacrifice to the Drackery overlords. The boy had always been different. While other children played in the fields or helped their families with daily work, Gio spent his time reading old books and asking questions that made adults uncomfortable. He wanted to know how things worked, why the sky changed colors, what lay beyond the stars they could see at night. His curiosity was endless, and to many in the colony, it was troublesome. Elder BOM stepped forward, his face drawn and pale. The old man had made the final decision about who would be offered this year. He couldn't meet Gio's eyes as he spoke to the crowd. "The Drackery will arrive soon," BOM announced, his voice shaking. "We have prepared the tribute according to the ancient agreement. May the Dragon Lords accept our offering and grant us another 10 years of peace." Jiho listened without fear. He had known for weeks that he would be chosen. He was an orphan after all. His parents had died when he was only 5 years old. Their research ship had been attacked by space pirates near the outer colonies, and Jiho had been the only survivor. The colony had taken him in, but he had always been an outsider. No family to speak for him. No special skills that made him valuable to the community. A woman pushed through the crowd. Dr. Hannah was old now, her hair completely white, but her eyes were still sharp and kind. She had been his parents' friend, and had taught Jiho everything she knew about science and history. She was the only person in the colony who understood him. "Jiho," she whispered, reaching for his bound hands. Tears ran down her weathered cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I tried to change their minds. I told them you were special, that you could help us in other ways, but they wouldn't listen." The boy managed a small smile. "It's okay, Dr. Hannah. You always taught me that curiosity is more important than safety. You said that asking questions is what makes us human. I'll keep asking questions even now." The old woman pressed something small into his palm. It was a data chip, no bigger than his thumbnail. "Your parents' research," she whispered urgently. "Everything I could recover from their ship. I've kept it hidden all these years. Take it with you. Maybe it will matter somehow." Before Gio could respond, the skies suddenly darkened. A shadow fell across the entire square, blocking out the sun. People screamed and ran in every direction as a massive shape descended from the clouds above. The sound of enormous wings beating the air was like thunder, and the wind they created knocked several people off their feet. The dragon landed in the center of the square, with a crash that shook the ground. It was enormous, easily the size of a small building. Its scales were deep crimson, gleaming like polished metal in the sunlight. Curved horns grew from its head like a crown of black stone. Smoke drifted from its nostrils with each breath. Jiho stared at the creature with wide eyes. He had seen pictures of the Drackery in old books, but nothing could prepare him for the reality. The dragon was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. His scientific mind immediately began analyzing what he saw. How did its wings support such massive weight? What temperature did its breath need to reach to produce visible smoke? How old was this creature? "I am Vextherin." The dragon's voice boomed across the square. Each word seemed to vibrate through the air itself. "I serve Emperor Calathrix, ruler of the Drackery Empire. I have come for your tribute. Present the offering now." Elder Baum practically dragged Jiho forward, his hands shaking. "Great Vextherin, mighty servant of the Emperor, we present this child as our tribute. Please accept him and leave our colony in peace for another decade." The dragon's massive head lowered until one golden eye was level with Jiho's face. The eye was bigger than the boy's entire head, with a vertical pupil that contracted as it focused on him. Jiho could feel the heat radiating from the creature's scales. He should have been terrified. Every survival instinct should have been screaming at him to run, to beg, to do anything to escape. Instead, Geo felt a strange sense of wonder wash over him. He was standing face to face with an alien species that had conquered human worlds. This was an opportunity to learn something no one else in his colony had ever learned. "You're amazing," Geo breathed, his voice full of genuine awe. "Your body temperature must be incredibly high. And your wing structure, it shouldn't work according to basic physics, but obviously it does. How is that possible? Do you have hollow bones like Earth birds? Or is there something else?" Complete silence fell over the square. Even the sobbing stopped. Everyone stared at the boy in shock and horror. No one spoke to a Dracary like that. No one questioned them. Tributes were supposed to be afraid, to accept their fate quietly. Vextherin blinked slowly, his pupil contracting even further. In all his centuries of collecting tributes from human colonies, nothing like this had ever happened. Humans usually begged for mercy or fainted from terror. They didn't ask about bone structure and physics. "What is your name, small one?" the dragon asked, his tone different now, curious rather than commanding. "I'm Geo, and I'm not really that small. I'm actually above average height for my age group." The boy paused and added, "Can I ask what happens to the tributes? The elders never tell us. Do you eat us? Keep us as slaves? Use us for experiments? I'd really like to know." A deep rumbling sound came from the dragon's chest. It took the colonists a moment to realize that Vextherin was laughing, a sound none of them had ever heard from a Dracary before. "Climb onto my back, Geo," the dragon said, extending one massive foreleg. "Your questions will be answered soon enough. Your new life begins today." The Imperial Palace was a marvel of ancient architecture, obsidian towers that pierced the red sky, connected by bridges of crystallized flame. Vextherin landed in the grand courtyard where dozens of other Dracary watched with glowing eyes. Geo slid down from the dragon's back, his legs shaking from the long flight through space. The journey had been incredible. They had flown beyond his planet's atmosphere, through the darkness between worlds, until they reached this volcanic moon called Ashkender. The palace before him looked like something from a dream, black stone carved with intricate patterns, towers that seemed to touch the crimson sky, and bridges made what looked like frozen fire connecting different sections. Other dragons watched from perches along the courtyard walls. Some were green, others blue or silver. All of them stared at Geo with eyes that glowed like hot coals. The boy could feel their attention on him like a physical weight, but he refused to look away. Instead, he studied them back, noting the differences in their scale patterns and body sizes. "Follow me," Vextherin said, transforming suddenly into a humanoid form. Geo hadn't known the Dracary could do that. The dragon was now a tall figure with red skin and horns, wearing robes of dark metal. "The Emperor is waiting." They walked through corridors so vast that Geo felt like an ant. The walls were covered in writing he couldn't read, flowing symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Strange crystals embedded in the ceiling provided illumination, casting everything in shades of orange and red. The air was hot and dry, smelling of sulfur and something else he couldn't identify. Geo's mind raced with questions, but he kept quiet for now. He would try to understand where he was and what would happen next. Other Dracary passed him in the corridors, all stopping to stare at the human boy. Some looked curious, others disgusted, and a few seemed angry at his presence. Finally, they reached a pair of massive doors covered in gold and black metal. Guards stood on either side, dragons in their true form, each one larger than Vextherin. The doors swung open without anyone touching them, and Geo was led inside. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling disappeared into shadows far above. Pillars of carved obsidian lined both sides of a long walkway that led to a raised platform at the far end. And on that platform, coiled like a mountain of living darkness, sat Emperor Calathrix. The Emperor was the largest dragon Geo had ever seen, easily 3 times the size of Vextherin. His scales were pure black and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His eyes burned with ancient intelligence, and when he breathed, small flames flickered between his teeth. Around the throne stood dozens of other Dracary in various forms, nobles and advisors, all dressed in elaborate clothing and jewelry. Vextherin bowed low. "Great Emperor, I present the tribute from a human colony of New Haven. Another human tribute. The Emperor's voice rumbled like distant thunder. The sound vibrated through Jiho's entire body. What makes you worthy of my time, small one? The assembled Drackery nobles expected the boy to grovel. Some leaned forward, anticipating entertainment as the human begged for his life. Others looked bored, having seen the scene play out countless times before with other tributes. Instead, Jiho straightened his back and looked directly at the Emperor. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear in his ears, but he kept his voice steady. I bring questions, he said clearly, and the willingness to learn. Isn't knowledge more valuable than fear? A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. Several nobles made sounds of outrage. How dare a human speak to the Emperor this way? How dare he look directly at their ruler without permission? One dragon actually hissed, smoke curling from his nostrils. But Emperor Calathrix raised one massive claw, and everyone fell silent immediately. The Emperor's eyes narrowed as he studied the boy more carefully. He had ruled for thousands of years and had seen countless humans brought before him. Most cried or fainted. Some tried to bargain. A few cursed him with their dying breath. But none had ever answered like this. Bold words from such a small creature. The Emperor said slowly, "Tell me, child, what is your name?" "Jiho, your majesty." "And you are not afraid of me, Jiho?" The boy considered this carefully. "I am afraid," he admitted honestly, "but I'm also curious. Fear and curiosity can exist together. You've conquered many worlds and ruled for a very long time. You must know things that no one in my colony could even imagine. That's more interesting than the fear." Several nobles began arguing loudly, demanding that the Emperor punish such disrespect. But Calathrix silenced them with a look. He leaned forward, bringing his enormous head closer to Jiho. The boy could feel the heat radiating from Emperor's scales and smelled the strange metallic scent of his breath. "You are either very brave or very foolish," the Emperor said. "Perhaps both. Very well, I will not have you executed today. Instead, you will serve in the palace archives. If your curiosity keeps you alive, perhaps you will prove useful. If not," he showed his teeth in what might have been a smile, "well, there are many ways to die in this palace." Vex Theron looked genuinely surprised. "My lord, you would allow him to access the archives?" "I am curious myself now," the Emperor replied. "I want to see what this unusual human does with knowledge. Take him to the library, assign him quarters, and have someone watch him at all times." 2 guards escorted Jiho out of the throne room. As they walked through more corridors, the boy's mind was spinning. He had expected to die today. Instead, he had been given access to something called archives, which meant books, data, information. His heart soared with excitement despite his dangerous situation. They brought him to the library, and Jiho stopped breathing for a moment. The room was vast beyond imagination, shelf after shelf rising hundreds of feet into the air, filled with books, scrolls, data crystals, and devices he didn't recognize. This was a collection of knowledge from across the galaxy. "You will sleep in a room nearby," one guard said. "You may study here during the day. But if you try to escape or cause trouble, you will be killed immediately. Understand?" Jiho nodded, barely hearing the threat. He was already moving toward the nearest shelf, his fingers reaching for a book written in Drackery script. He couldn't read it yet, but he would learn. He would learn everything. That night, sleeping on a simple bed in a small room off the library, Jiho clutched the data chip Dr. Hannah had given him. Somewhere in this vast collection of knowledge, there had to be information about humans, about his people's history, about why they were enemies with the Drackery in the first place. He would find answers. He would understand. And somehow, that understanding might save not just his life, but something much bigger than himself. Outside his window, the volcanic moon sky glowed red, and in the distance, he could hear dragons calling to each other in their ancient language. Jiho fell asleep with a smile on his face, already dreaming of the mysteries he would uncover. Jiho had been living in the palace library for 3 weeks now. Every day, he studied the ancient texts, learning to read Drackery script by comparing it to human languages he already knew. The work was slow and difficult, but he was making progress. More importantly, he had made an unexpected friend. Myri was a young Dracry female with deep blue scales, a rare color among her kind. Unlike the other dragons who ignored Jiho or treated him with contempt, Myri was genuinely curious about him. She was a scholar, one of the few Dracry who actually spent time in the archives. Most warriors considered reading to be beneath them. She had found Jiho one evening, surrounded by stacks of books, comparing texts written in old human languages with newer Dracry translations. Instead of questioning why a tribute was allowed such access, she had sat down and helped him understand a particularly difficult passage. Since then, they had spent hours together each night after the other dragons left the library. Myri helped Jiho learn faster, and in return, he shared human perspectives that fascinated her. She had never really talked to a human before. Most Dracry consider humans to be inferior creatures, barely worth noticing. "You're different from what I expected," Myri admitted one night. Her form shifted to humanoid, so they could sit comfortably at the same table. She looked young, maybe 16 in human years, with long dark hair and those striking blue eyes. "What did you expect?" Jiho asked. Looking up from the scroll, he was translating. "Someone scared, someone broken. The tributes usually don't last long here. They get sick from the heat or the air, or they simply lose hope and stop eating." Her expression was sad. "I never understood why we kept taking them. It seemed cruel and pointless." "Maybe it is," Jiho said quietly. "But I'm here now, so I might as well learn everything I can." That night, Myri seemed nervous about something. She kept glancing toward the library entrance, as if worried someone might overhear them. "There's something I need to show you," she finally said. "Something dangerous. But I think you should see it." She led him deep into the archives, past sections he had never been allowed to enter. They went down a spiral staircase carved into the rock itself, descending far below the main library. The air grew hotter and the light dimmer. Finally, they reached a door covered in symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. Myri placed her hand on the door and whispered words in ancient Dracry. The door swung open silently, revealing a small chamber beyond. The room was empty except for a pedestal in the center, and floating above it was text made of pure light. "This is a hidden chamber," Myri explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Only a few people know it exists. I found it years ago while researching ancient history. The Emperor doesn't know about it, and if he did—" She shivered. "He would destroy it." Jiho stepped closer to the floating text. His heart started racing as he realized he could read some of it. It was written in ancient Terran, the language his parents had taught him when he was very young, the language in the old books Dr. Hannah had shared with him. "When the stars align in the serpent's eye, a prince of the forgotten bloodline shall return. Dragons shall kneel or burn." "It's a prophecy," Jiho breathed, reading the glowing words again and again. "But I don't understand what it means." Myri moved to stand beside him. "Your people once ruled the stars," she explained, her voice sad and serious. "Thousands of years ago, humans had an empire called the Terran Ascendancy. It was vast and powerful, spanning hundreds of worlds. The Dracry were just one species among many." Jiho stared at her in shock. "That's not what we're taught. We're told that humans have always been weak, that we've always needed the protection of stronger species." "That's what the Emperor wants everyone to believe," Myri said. "But it's not true. The Terran Ascendancy was incredible. They had technology we still don't fully understand. They explored galaxies we've never reached. And then," she paused, her expression dark, "something destroyed it. A war so catastrophic that most records were erased. Entire planets were burned. Billions died. When it was over, the Ascendancy was gone and humans were scattered across the galaxy in small, weak colonies. And the Dracry conquered what was left." Jiho finished, understanding now. "Yes, we took control of the surviving human colonies. The Emperor says it was to bring order, to protect humans from themselves. But really," Myri looked ashamed, "really, it was just conquest. We took advantage of your people's weakness." Jiho turned back to the prophecy, his mind racing. But this prophecy speaks of a prince returning. It says the royal bloodline. The royal family of the Terran Ascendancy was thought to be completely extinct. Myri interrupted. Every member was killed in the final battles of the war. At least, that's what the histories say. But this prophecy was written before the war, and it speaks of someone returning. She pulled out a small device from her robes. It looked ancient, made of metal that seemed to shift colors in the light. This is a genetic scanner from the Terran era. I found it in another hidden cache. It can read DNA and identify bloodline markers. The royal family had specific genetic traits that made them different from other humans, traits that allowed them to interface with certain ancient technologies. Geo looked at the scanner, then at Myri. You think I might be? No, that's impossible. I'm just an orphan from a small colony. My parents were scientists, not royalty. But you said you don't remember much about them. Myri pressed gently. You were only 5 when they died, and their ship was attacked by pirates near the outer colonies. Colonies that are far from the main human settlements. What were they doing out there? Research, Geo said automatically. Dr. Hannah said they were doing research. Research on what? Geo realized he didn't know. Dr. Hannah had never told him the details. He pulled out the data chip she had given him before he left New Haven. The chip containing his parents' work. He had been too afraid to look at it, worried it might be damaged or empty. There's only one way to know for certain, Myri said, holding up the scanner. If you have royal blood, this device will show it. The genetic markers are unique and unmistakable. Geo's hand trembled as he reached for the scanner. Part of him didn't want to know. His life was already complicated enough. But curiosity won, as it always did. He placed his hand on the scanner's surface. It hummed softly, and lights flickered across its face as it analyzed his DNA. The process took less than a minute, but it felt like hours. Then the scanner blazed with golden light, so bright that both Jiho and Myri had to shield their eyes. Impossible, Myri whispered, staring at the results displayed in the air above the device. You're actually... The chamber doors exploded inward with a deafening crash. Emperor Calathrix stood in the doorway, his massive form filling the entire entrance. His eyes burned with fury and something else, something that looked like recognition. So the prophecy awakens, the Emperor growled, his voice making the walls shake. I should have known. That curiosity, that fearlessness, that refusal to bow. It's in your blood, isn't it, boy? Jiho stepped backward, his heart hammering. I don't understand any of this. Don't you? The Emperor moved into the chamber, forcing Myri to scramble out of his way. You are the heir to the Terran throne, the last prince of the bloodline that once ruled the stars. And by ancient law older than my empire, you must prove your claim or die in the attempt. What does that mean? Geo demanded, finding courage despite his terror. It means tomorrow you face the trial of the ancient flame. Emperor Calathrix said, if you survive, you'll be recognized as what you are. If you fail, the Emperor showed his teeth. Then the prophecy dies with you, and I can finally bury the past forever. The Arena of Flames was a massive coliseum carved from volcanic rock. Thousands of Dracari gathered to witness what they believed would be Jiho's execution. The stand were filled with dragons in both their true forms and humanoid shapes, all waiting to see the human boy fail and die. The air shimmered with heat, and the smell of sulfur was so strong it made Geo's eyes water. He stood in the center of the arena floor, feeling very small and very alone. Emperor Calathrix perched on the highest platform, his black scales gleaming in the red light of the volcanic sky. His voice boomed across the arena, reaching every corner. The Hearthgore has killed every false claimant, the Emperor announced. If you are truly of royal blood, the ancient flame will recognize you. If not, you will burn to ash. These are the ancient laws, written before my empire existed. I am bound to honor them. Jiho looked up at the thousands of watching eyes. Most of the Dracari looked eager to see him die. A few seemed curious. He spotted Myri in the crowd, her blue scales making her easy to find. She looked terrified for him. Vex Theron stood near the Emperor's platform, his expression unreadable. The boy clutched the data chip from Dr. Hannah in his hand. He had spent the entire night studying everything he could find about the Terran Ascendancy's technology. Myri had helped him, bringing forbidden texts from the deepest parts of the archives. They had worked until dawn, piecing together fragments of information. What they learned was both amazing and frightening. The ancient flame wasn't actually fire. It was a defense system created by the Terran Ascendancy to protect their most important secrets. Only those with royal blood could safely approach it. Anyone else would be destroyed instantly. But the texts were old and incomplete. Some pages were missing. Some information was corrupted. Geo had no way to know if what he learned was enough to survive. "It is time," the Emperor declared. "Let the trial begin." The arena floor split open in front of Geo. A stairway descended into darkness, lit only by a faint blue glow from below. Heat poured up from the opening, so intense that several Dracri in the front rows shifted uncomfortably. Geo took a deep breath and started down the stairs. Each step took him deeper into the volcanic rock beneath the arena. The temperature rose with every meter he descended. Sweat poured down his face and his clothes stuck to his skin. His throat felt dry and raw from breathing the hot air. The stairway ended at a massive door made of metal that looked like gold and silver mixed together. Strange symbols covered its surface, symbols Geo recognized from his parents' data chip. His hands shook as he touched the door. It felt cool despite the heat all around, and at his touch, it swung open silently. The chamber beyond took his breath away. It was circular and huge, with walls that seemed to be made of crystal. In the very center stood a pillar of blue light, the ancient flame. But as Geo stepped closer, he realized Myri had been right. This wasn't fire at all. It was pure energy, contained and controlled by technology he barely understood. "Genetic scan required," a voice said suddenly. It came from everywhere and nowhere, speaking in ancient Terran. "Identify yourself." Geo's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. "I am Geo, son of Dr. Tamine and Dr. Salmon." His voice echoed in the chamber. "I come seeking the truth." Bloodline analysis initiated. Light washed over Geo's body, scanning him from head to toe. He stood perfectly still, afraid that moving might disrupt the process. The blue flame pulsed brighter, and he felt something strange, like invisible fingers touching his mind, reading his memories, understanding who he was. Then he remembered the data chip. With trembling hands, he pulled it out and looked around the chamber. There, on the wall near the flame, was a port that matched the chip's design. He ran to it and pushed the chip in. Information flooded into the system. His parents researched their discoveries, their life's work. All of it poured into the ancient flame's core. And suddenly Geo understood. His parents hadn't been ordinary scientists. They had been searching for the lost royal bloodline. They had been searching for him. "Genetic markers confirmed," the voice announced. "Heir recognized. Prince of the Terran Ascendancy identified." The blue flame condensed suddenly, flowing out of its pillar like liquid light. Geo gasped as it rushed toward him, but he didn't run. He couldn't run. The energy hit him, and instead of burning, it felt cool and alive. It flowed into his body through his hands, his chest, spreading through his blood like ice water. Ancient technology awakened inside him, technology that had been dormant in his genes since birth. Neural interfaces activated, connecting his mind to systems that had slept for thousands of years. Information downloaded directly into his brain, teaching him things his ancestors had known, showing him secrets that had been lost. Glowing circuit patterns spread across his skin like living tattoos, blue light tracing lines along his arms, his neck, his face. His eyes blazed with the same blue radiance as the ancient flame. He could feel the power of the old empire flowing through him, recognizing him as its heir. When the process finished, Geo stood transformed. The chamber door opened behind him, and he walked back up the stairs, each step steady and confident. The heat that had nearly overwhelmed him before now felt comfortable, almost pleasant. He emerged into the arena, and the crowd fell completely silent. Every Dracri stared at the human boy who now glowed with ancient power. The circuit patterns on his skin pulsed with light, and his eyes shone like stars. Emperor Calathrix rose slowly from his platform. For a long moment, the ruler of the Dracri Empire simply stared at Jiho. Then, slowly, so slowly that many dragons gasped in shock, the Emperor lowered his massive head until it touched the arena floor. "Rise, Prince of Forgotten Stars." The Emperor's voice rang out across the arena. "The ancient debt is owed. The prophecy is fulfilled. Dragons kneel before the true heir of the Terran ascendancy." One by one, every Dracry in the arena bowed. Some did it willingly, amazed by what they had witnessed. Others did it reluctantly, angry and confused. But all of them bowed, bound by laws older than their empire. Myri was crying with relief and joy. Vextherin looked stunned but pleased. And Jiho stood in the center of it all, a 12-year-old boy from a forgotten colony, now recognized as the prince of an empire that had fallen thousands of years ago. He looked down at his glowing hands and felt the weight of history pressing down on him. This wasn't what he had expected when he was offered as tribute. This wasn't what he had wanted. But it was real, and it was happening, and somehow he would have to find a way to live up to it. The prophecy had spoken of dragons kneeling or burning. Today they had chosen to kneel. But Jiho knew this was only the beginning. The hard part, figuring out what to do next, was still ahead of him. The palace erupted in chaos. Some Dracary celebrated the prophecy's fulfillment. Others plotted rebellion. But Jiho had no interest in conquest. The days following the trial were difficult and confusing. Half the Dracary nobility wanted to honor Jiho as the prophecy demanded. The other half wanted him dead, seeing him as a threat to their power and way of life. Arguments broke out in the palace halls. Some dragons refused to accept that a human child could have any authority over them. Jiho spent most of his time in the War Council chamber with Emperor Calathrix, trying to figure out what his new position actually meant. Myri stayed by his side constantly, helping translate the more complex political discussions. Vextherin and several other high-ranking nobles attended these meetings as well. "I don't want to rule over you," Jiho told the Emperor during one of these sessions. He stood at the large table covered with star maps and tactical displays. "That's not why I'm here. I never asked for any of this." "The prophecy doesn't care what you want," one of the nobles growled. He was an old dragon named Kale, his scales scarred from centuries of battles. "You carry royal blood. The ancient laws give you authority over the Terran territories. But those territories don't exist anymore," Jiho argued. "The ascendancy fell thousands of years ago. I can't rule over something that's gone." "Then what do you want?" Emperor Calathrix asked. His tone wasn't angry, just curious. The Emperor had been surprisingly reasonable since the trial, as if seeing Jiho survive the ancient flame had changed something in him. Jiho thought carefully before answering. "I want to understand why we fought in the first place. Humans and Dracary have been enemies for so long that nobody remembers how it started. But there has to be a reason. And if I can understand that reason, maybe I can find a way to fix things." Several nobles laughed at this. The idea that a child could fix thousands of years of hatred seemed ridiculous to them. But Myri smiled, and the Emperor raised his claw for silence. "Very well," Calathrix said. "Show us what you can find." Using the restored Terran technology that now flowed through his blood, Jiho accessed ancient military databases that had been sealed for millennia. Information appeared in his mind as if he had always known it. He could interface with old systems, read encrypted files, and reconstruct deleted records. What he found shocked him to his core. "Look," he said, projecting holographic images above the council table for everyone to see. Three-dimensional maps of the galaxy appeared, showing the Terran ascendancy at its height, hundreds of worlds connected by trade and peace. The Dracary Empire was there too, occupying a different region of space. "The Terran-Dracary War wasn't our doing," Jiho explained, his voice shaking with excitement and horror. "Look at these communication records. Someone manipulated both our species. They sent false messages, faked attacks, created incidents that made us think the other side was hostile. More images appeared, messages that claimed to be from Terran officials declaring war on the Dracary, but were actually fabricated. Records of Dracary raids on human colonies that never actually happened, created through digital forgery. A third force," Jiho continued. "They're called the Voidborn in these files. They manipulated both humans and Dracary into destroying each other. While we fought, they watched from the shadows. And when we were both weakened from the war, they planned to sweep in and conquer everything. But that didn't happen, Vextherin said, leaning forward to study the holographic data. We defeated the Terran Ascendancy. If these Voidborn were waiting to attack, why didn't they? Geo pulled up more files, his hands moving through the holographic interface. Because they weren't ready yet. Look at these astronomical charts. The Voidborn come from another galaxy entirely. The journey takes thousands of years, even with advanced technology. They sent advanced agents to start the war between us, then went back to bring their main fleet. He highlighted a section of the star map showing deep space beyond the known galaxy. According to these calculations, their fleet should arrive soon. Maybe in a few months, maybe in a year. But they're coming. The room fell silent. Every dragon stared at the evidence Geo had presented. Some looked skeptical, others frightened. Emperor Calathrix studied the data carefully, his ancient eyes taking in every detail. This could be a fabrication, Kale said finally. Old records can be falsified. How do we know the humans didn't create this evidence to save themselves? Because the Drackery records show the same thing, Myri said quietly. She had been accessing the palace's own archives on her data tablet. I've been checking our historical files. There are gaps in our records from that era, entire years where information is missing or corrupted. And the war did start suddenly, without the usual escalation you'd expect. It's like someone flipped a switch and we were suddenly enemies. Emperor Calathrix rose to his full height, his expression grave. If what you're showing us is true, then everything I believed about the war was a lie. We didn't conquer the humans because they were weak. We both destroyed each other because we were tricked. Yes, Geo said. And now the ones who tricked us are coming back to finish what they started. The Emperor walked a window, looking out over his empire. For a long time, he said nothing. The other nobles waited nervously, unsure what their leader would decide. Finally, Calathrix turned back to face the council. Then we have no choice. If the Voidborn are truly returning, neither humans nor Drackery can face them alone. We barely survived fighting each other. We'll have no chance against a third enemy. You're suggesting an alliance? Kale asked, his voice full of disbelief. I'm suggesting survival, the Emperor replied. Prince Jiho, you said you wanted to fix things between our peoples. Here is your chance. I propose a formal alliance between the Drackery Empire and the human colonies. We share our technology, our resources, and our warriors. Together, we prepare for the Voidborn's arrival. Jiho felt dizzy with the weight of this decision. A few weeks ago, he had been a nobody, an orphan offered as tribute. Now he was being asked to forge an alliance between species that have been enemies for thousands of years. The humans will never trust the Drackery, he said honestly. You've oppressed them for too long. They'll think this is a trick. Then you must convince them, Emperor Calathrix said. You are one of them, but you carry royal blood. You survived the ancient flame. If anyone can bridge the gap between our peoples, it's you. Myri put her hand on Jiho's shoulder. You don't have to do this alone. I'll help you. And there are others among the Drackery who want peace. Vextherin nodded. I will support this alliance. The boy has proven himself worthy of respect. Jiho looked around the room at the assembled dragons. Some still looked hostile, but others seemed thoughtful. He thought about Dr. Hannah and the people of New Haven. He thought about all the human colonies scattered across the galaxy, living in fear of their Drackery overlords. This was his chance to change everything. All right, he said, his voice stronger now. I'll do it, but the alliance has to be real. No more tributes. No more oppression. Humans and Drackery as equals, working together. Agreed, Emperor Calathrix said, extending his massive claw. Jiho placed his small hand against it, and they sealed the bargain. 3 months later, Jiho stood on the bridge of a massive ship, a Terran dreadnought that had been dormant for thousands of years, now reactivated by his royal blood. The ship hung in orbit above his home colony of New Haven. Below, he could see the settlement where he had grown up. The colonists were gathered in the square again, but this time they weren't offering a tribute. They were staring up at the sky in amazement as human, and Drackery ships flew side by side in formation. Myri stood beside Jiho in her humanoid form, watching the view screen. "Are you ready?" "No," Jiho admitted, "but I'm going anyway." They took a shuttle down to the surface. When Jiho stepped out onto the platform in the central square, the same place where he had been offered as sacrifice, the crowd gasped. He still carried the glowing circuit patterns on his skin, and his eyes still shone with ancient power. Dr. Hannah pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "Jiho, is it really you?" "It's me," he said, hugging the old woman tightly. "And I have so much to tell you." Elder Boehm fell to his knees. "Forgive us for what we did." "There's nothing to forgive," Jiho said gently, helping the old man stand. "You did what you thought you had to do. But things are different now. The Drackery are no longer your enemies. We're allies, because there's something worse coming, and we need to face it together." He explained everything: the prophecy, the trial, the truth about the ancient war, and the threat of the Voidborn. The colonists listened in stunned silence. "I was offered as a sacrifice," Jiho said finally, his voice carrying across the square. "But I'm returning as something else, a bridge between two peoples who need each other. I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that humans and Drackery can work together. Trust that we can build something better than what we had before." Dr. Hannah smiled through her tears. "We trust you, Jiho. We always have." One by one, the other colonists nodded their agreement. It wouldn't be easy. Thousands of years of hatred couldn't be erased overnight, but it was a start. As the sun set over New Haven, a combined fleet of human and Drackery ships assembled in the sky above. Jiho stood on the bridge of his dreadnought, looking out at the vessels that carried both species toward an uncertain future. "Ready, Prince?" Myri asked, settling into the co-pilot seat. Jiho smiled. "I'm still just a kid who asks too many questions." "No." Vex Theron's voice came through the communication system from his own ship. "You are the Prince of Two Worlds. And maybe, just maybe, you're exactly what the galaxy needs." The fleet activated their faster-than-light drives, leaving trails of light against the stars as they jumped into hyperspace. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between galaxies, the Voidborn were coming. But they wouldn't find humanity and the Drackery fighting each other anymore. They would find them standing together, united by a boy who refused to accept that enemies had to stay enemies forever. Jiho leaned back in his chair and smiled. He had been offered as a sacrifice, but it had become something no one expected. A prince who brought peace instead of war, understanding instead of hatred, and hope for a future that had seemed impossible. The stars stretched out before him, full of mysteries waiting to be discovered. And for the first time in his life, Jiho wasn't just asking questions about the universe. He was helping to shape its future. The end.